Hey, this is Toby. In this video I'm carving two symmetrical pairs of wooden climbing holes, and because I changed my mind about the shape after the glue up, it is going to become a bit of a mess. I prefer to make large holes out of laminated wood. There are several reasons for that. Most importantly, large thick slabs of wood are very expensive. Shout out to Ludwig who gave me these two boards for free. We're not sure what type of wood it is. It's medium dense and quite soft. Please drop a comment if you think you know what it is. When I started making laminated holes, I experimented with different wood species and different surface finishes before I glued the boards together. I realized that in some cases the face-to-face glue joints are not very strong. Especially when using different wood species, it is very important to not only start with flat and clean surfaces, but also to sand them before the glue up. When I glued together the boards straight after planing, I had delamination issues in some cases right after removing the clamps. I assume this is related to the smooth surface finish after planing, compared to the rougher finish after sanding. There's one more thing which is good to know. You should avoid arranging the boards like this. The growth rings will want to straighten up when the wood dries, and when that happens it is possible that the glue joint will start to crack at the edge, which is the weakest part of the joint. Rather arrange the boards like this to counteract those forces. Those of you who have seen my old videos might notice a lot of new tools in this video. Most of the tools in this video, apart from the carving tools and the Rotex sanders, are actually not mine. I started renting a workshop here in Munich where the big machines are included in the rent. This is super convenient because Munich is an expensive city. Please feel free to reach out to me if you're looking for some workshop space here in Munich. I'd be happy to forward the contacts. I have seen different methods to apply wood glue. Some people don't use water at all, or mix the wood glue with water, or wet the boards first. Not sure if any method is better or worse. I wetted the boards in this case because it's a lot of surface area, which is why I wanted to buy myself some extra time. This is D3 wood glue, which should do the job for this project, so the holes will be able to handle high humidity. You might have noticed that board number 3 is upside down. I have no idea how that happened, and at this point I wasn't really concerned about delamination issues. Now, while I'm editing this video, I think I know better. But I also think I will get away with it in this case. I tried to apply even pressure while at the same time tightening the clamps not too much. Probably I could have used a wee bit less wood glue, but rather a little bit too much than too little. Not only do I not know the type of wood of the bottom board, but I'm also not sure whether the middle board is European walnut, apple or pear. The only thing I do know is that the top board is black locust. When I selected the boards for this project, I had the idea to carve one huge climbing hole, but I couldn't fully visualize how the hole should look like, which is a crucial part for me. So I changed my mind and decided to shape two holes, one chuck and one sloper. For the front section of the chuck, which will become the positive part of the hole, I used this template from one of my favorite chucks. As a warm-up, I decided to shape a pair of these chucks first. This is elm at the bottom, maple in the middle and black locust at the top. Sometimes, when I come up with a new shape, it just appears in front of my inner eye. So I will grab a pencil and try to bring its layout to paper. If I'm lucky, I do have the time to start shaping while I can still imagine how the hole is supposed to look like. In this case, I was happy with the result, which is why I made a template for it. I was pleasantly surprised when I used this little Swiss machine for the first time. It shows again that the blade is more important than the size of the tool. The only thing that can be a little bit annoying is that because of its size, it's not very heavy, so it can be pushed around easily. As you can see here, this stick helped me to push straight towards the blade. Having one of these large oscillating edge sanders available is a game changer. But you have to be a little bit more careful with this machine, especially on how to move your workpiece. Otherwise, large heavy objects will become airborne. In this step I copied the outline of the holes to be able to make mirrored pairs. One of the questions I get asked a lot is, I want to start shaping wooden climbing holes, what tools do I start with? And in terms of saws, I would recommend the bandsaw. It's one of the most versatile tools for shaping climbing holes. You can tilt the table and you can cut tight radii. Furthermore, a good machine doesn't have to be ridiculously expensive, as you can see in this video. It's more important to spend a little bit of extra money on the blades. In terms of blades, I would recommend a 6 to 10 mm wide blade with a 10 to 14 teeth per inch count. The outline of the big pair of chucks is now symmetrical. Let's quickly prepare the second pair of chucks and discuss sanders. A belt sander is super useful, but it doesn't have to be a big machine like this. A small belt sander is sufficient and it can be used for many other woodworking projects. A drill press is definitely one of the tools that you don't need when you get started. I will link one of my previous videos above where I explain all the different drill bits that I use. Another common question is, what type of wood should I use to make climbing holes out of? I personally think there is no clear answer to this question, and that it depends very much on your woodworking and carving experience. For example, if you've never carved anything in your life, I would definitely recommend using some really soft wood like pine. Pine is not ideal in terms of durability, but it will give you the advantage to shape more holes in the same amount of time, which is super useful because your first couple of shapes probably won't be perfect. In case you already have some shaping experience, I would definitely recommend using hardwood. Soft hardwood such as tulip is ideal if you want to shape as many holes as possible. The only disadvantage is that softer woods are typically not as durable as medium and hard hardwoods. Other climbers have told me that especially in hotter climates, tulip holes tend to crack. I personally also avoid working with wood that has higher contents of tannic acid, such as oak, because these types of wood might change their color over time. Another factor to consider is the pore structure of the wood. I had issues with certain types of wood that have very large open pores. Over time, those pores filled up with grease and chalk and made the hole really slippery. Let's start with the fun part, the power carving. This is the carver's vise by Veritas, which is bolted to a plywood plate and then clamped onto the workbench. I have worked with various power carving tools over the years. I can definitely recommend the Arbotech tools, but I won't go too much into detail in this video, since I've already covered this topic in my previous video. In this video, I would like to mention the Rotex sanders. These sanders fill a gap between my angle grinder sanding attachment and orbital sanders. They don't remove as much material as an angle grinder, but definitely more than an orbital sander, while achieving almost the same finish quality. A soft interlayer pad is indispensable when sanding curved surfaces. I don't have to use a dust mask when I use the Rotex sanders hooked up to a vacuum. The AirPods Pro are another upgrade. For me, they make woodworking even more enjoyable by reducing the noise level and being able to fully enjoy listening to music and podcasts. The following part of shaping wooden climbing holes is the part that I personally enjoy doing the most. I think it's the combination of woodworking and creativity that appeals to me. Please keep in mind that you don't have to use these power carving tools to shape your own wooden climbing holes. This is just one of many methods. You can get very far with only using a saw and a belt sander. You should also keep in mind that these tools make a big mess because they create a lot of dust. Other climbers have reached out to me who started using the mini carver because they watched my videos and they were disappointed because of the mess this tool makes. The same applies to the sanding attachment on the angle grinder. I personally love and hate it at the same time. It's a very efficient tool, but it creates this fine dust which travels everywhere. So if you don't have a dedicated workshop space, for example if you're using your garage for woodworking, I would definitely keep in mind that this method of shaping wooden climbing holes is super messy. If you made it so far into the video and you're still enjoying what you're watching, you could consider subscribing if you want to see more. I also want to mention that this kind of format, with the voiceover, including all the little mistakes, and being honest about the things I don't know, was inspired by Cam from Blacktail Studio. Big shout out to him for his inspirational work. It's also because of his videos that I just recently started using CA glue to fill cracks. In some cases I apply the activator first, so the glue drops don't run off. In the past I used to mix wood glue with sawdust. This method also works, but it takes way more time to dry. Both the small and big Rotex sander can be used in different modes. One mode is called rotary sanding. In this mode the pad is forced to rotate, while at the same time performing an eccentric motion. This mode is more aggressive than the random orbital mode. For most of the things I do, I use the rotary mode. I personally think climbing holes don't have to have a super smooth surface finish. They will have a tough life anyway and they will accumulate some scratches over time. So I don't want to spend too much time on sanding, which is why I stop at 50 or 60 grit on the Rotex sander and continue with 80 grit and hand sanding. I don't spend too much time on the top surface because most of the work was already done with the Rotex sander. I rather focus on the grip area where I use the more aggressive belt sandpaper. A nice and even surface finish is especially important when making symmetrical holes. In this case, I want to make something special, which is why I'm going for a polished top surface. In the past, I used sanding sponges to achieve this, but now I'm using this sanding fleece on the Rotex sander. These sanding fleece pads remove the smaller scratches from sanding and they make the grain pop. Another benefit is that the top surface is less likely to be used as a foothold. In the last step, I use some sandpaper to define the transition between grip area and top surface. This isn't the perfect lighting, but you might be able to see that the surface is more shiny now. I will spare you most of the details of making the second hold, but I want to show you one small repair that I had to make. While shaping the top surface of this hold, I noticed a small crack between the top and middle board. This crack could either be caused by expansion or contraction of the boards, or it could be caused by an uneven surface finish. Anyway, I don't think it's a big concern in general, but since these are supposed to be top-notch quality climbing holes, I definitely wanted to fix this. For most repairs, the medium CA glue is perfect, but in this case I noticed I need something that penetrates the crack, which is why I switched to using this thin CA glue. I quickly want to go back to the sandpaper topic. A lot of people have reached out to me and asked me what grits do I use. They are always surprised when I tell them I mainly use 60, 80 or maximum 120 grit sandpaper. I know that personal preferences may differ, but keep in mind that most of my shapes are well rounded. This makes it much more time consuming compared to flat surfaces if you work your way up to, let's say, 320 or 1000 grit. And in the end, I don't think you can tell much of a difference. While only a few small details have to be done to finish this pair of jugs, I want to quickly explain why I call these warm-up jugs. For me, carving a familiar shape is like writing a word I've written many times. I don't have to think about each letter, which means I don't have to think about each step and each detail of the shape. On the other hand, carving a new shape is a completely different process, especially when I don't know where I'm heading. Which is exactly what happened with this pair of jugs. The top boards are not as wide as the bottom board because I had a completely different shape in mind. I thought about reducing the total size of this design, but I opted for the approach of removing a little bit more material from the upper side of the hold. I spare you most of the carving of the first hold because I want to focus on how I try to replicate a shape. In the first step, I remove as much material as necessary to create a slightly convex, sloped surface which runs smoothly from the top to the bottom of the hold. During this stage, I don't have to compare the two holds much, since this method restricts the number of degrees of freedom. When I'm in the process of shaping symmetrical pairs of holes, I compare the two shapes many times. The transitions between different boards work as contour lines and make it easier to judge whether certain parts of the hold are mirrored well enough. These contour lines are very useful because the grain of each board is different, which means that the growth rings alone can be very misleading when comparing two shapes. Some of you might be interested in what carving tool they should buy first. I would definitely recommend to buy an angle grinder first. The angle grinder is the most versatile tool because you can use it with a flap disc, you can use it with a sanding pad and with different carving attachments. As I already mentioned in my previous videos, I definitely recommend a variable speed angle grinder. Using sanding discs on an angle grinder only makes sense at a lower RPM setting. Another tip is to buy new tools only tool by tool. Over time you will notice if a certain tool could make your workflow more efficient or less tiring. If you buy a new tool at this point in time, it's most likely that you will use it to its full potential. Another tip for making symmetrical pairs of holes is to split up the workflow. It's much easier to achieve a high degree of symmetry if individual steps are carried out for both holes directly after each other, compared to making each hole separately from start to finish. A question that I get asked a lot is, should I apply any finish to my holes? As always, my answer is, it depends. If you want to make as many holes as possible, it's not worth the effort. But if you want your holes to look awesome, and you like that kind of style, a shiny finish, then go for it. But I would definitely recommend not to oil or paint the grip area. As you can see here, shaping these large jugs made a total mess. The last question I want to discuss in this video that I get asked frequently is whether I still use a CNC milling machine. When we moved back from New Zealand to Germany, I sold my CNC. I'm thinking about buying another CNC machine at some point in the future, but right now I enjoy shaping by hand much more. The main reason for that is that I enjoy the full process of making wooden climbing holes. When using a CNC machine, the fun part is done by the CNC and the operator has to do the boring stuff, such as preparation work and sanding, and repairing the CNC. But if you're interested in how a simple CNC workflow looks like, please drop a comment below. I still have all the footage from how I used my CNC to mill wooden climbing holes. If enough people are interested in this topic, I might start editing it. As you can see now, this time the light is much better to see the polishing effect of the sanding fleece. If you're interested in my work, you can also follow me on Instagram at Tobias Wurft, or you can buy these holes on my website, wurft.com. I hope you enjoyed this kind of format. Thanks for watching and catch you next time.